Thank you, Yatwan. All right. Can people see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Is it full screen?
No.
Nope.
I mean, it's pretty big, but.
Okay, let me just try to do something here. View. Now better?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay. So I'll just hide that with the faces.
Yeah.
So I think it's thank you, Yatwan, for inviting me on this discussion. The first thing I will say before we dive into it is that I'm not at all an expert on digital carbon footprint, but I do have a lot of interest into the topic and how it links to my area of expertise, which is the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. So I thought I would provide a little bit of context on how this conversation came about, because we're all pretty much in confinement at this moment, wherever we are in the world, and we realize that digital connectivity allows us to do more global collaboration than ever, which is really an upside that I've started to notice during the crisis, that we're involved in much more conversation around the world, especially with the Impact Hub network. But then comes the question that with so much digital connectivity, is there a downside of having all this increase in connectivity? Oops. I'm just trying. Oops.
By the way, if you want full screen, you do Control Shift F5.
Okay. As you see, I'm not an expert either in technology. I will leave it like that if that's okay.
That's okay.
So how this conversation came about? Well, the Impact Hub network, as I said, is a global network in 109 locations around the world, and we're focused on creating global collaboration around impact topics. So this is just a screenshot of our Impact Hub app platform, where our community can gather online to share content. And I was just scrambling around this app 2 weeks ago when I noticed Yatwan's event here in Sweden. Going digital, is our digital carbon footprint really smaller? And I thought, well, this is interesting for a topic happening in Sweden. We are working on exactly the same topic here in Montreal and in Quebec, and are planning a series of discussion in the next few weeks and few months on digital carbon footprint and citizens. So I thought I would reach out to Yatwan and see if we could blend some of the ideas into a kind of a brainstorming session. Now, this is just a map of our Impact Hub network. We're obviously here in Montreal, all the way up here to Sweden. And really what we're focusing on is how can we work as a global collective to accelerate action on United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So we often think about our daily issues as on their own, whether it's the environment, whether it's poverty or social inequalities. What we're trying to do is an integration of different challenges that we face daily in order to create better coordination and better integration. So a reminder on what the UN SDGs are, if this topic is new for you. The Agenda 2030, also known as the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, was adopted by 193 countries in September 2015 as a global agenda for our member state or member of the United Nations to work towards until 2030. So under each 17 Sustainable Development Goals, we find a specific array of indicators and targets that we need to achieve on you see a variety of topics. Now, the topic of our discussion today, digital carbon footprint and means, is really involved, I think, in multiple SDGs. I think we can relate it a lot to climate action, so how we're actually reducing our carbon emissions, but also in clean energy, as how are we thinking in the design of new solutions to, as we have an increase in digital connectivity, to actually reduce the footprint of new technologies on this. So this is kind of the lens that, as a global network in Montreal, Stockholm, Amsterdam, we like to think about how can we have greater impact on the world. Here is, whoops, we'll just put that aside. So we use the SDGs as really a common framework to view our impact in the world. Every year, the Impact Hub Network kind of surveys all of our members around the world. I don't know if Katie from Impact Hub Stockholm is on this call, but we're accustomed to leading kind of a survey with entrepreneurs, with individuals that are part of our community, to understand the landscape of who's working on what, on which SDGs, in order to better fill different gaps. But today, and this is where I wanted to kind of focus our discussion, is that we can think about the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and this sudden increase in digital connectivity with excuse me, that's my French coming a little. We can think about the pandemic as affecting all of the SDGs in interrelationships. So I think what I thought was really interesting with Yat Wan's description of the event of the Stockholm Green Drinks is really, are we really having a smaller footprint through the crisis? And this graph, or this schema, was published here by a source of the United Nations, saying that the impact of the COVID-19 on climate action is that we have reduced commitment to climate action, but less environmental footprint due to less production and transportation. So I thought, is that really the case? Like, as I said, I'm not an expert on the topic, but this was published only 3 weeks ago. And it has been all over the news that maybe the COVID-19 crisis is really reducing our carbon footprint in various areas, but it's still questionable. So how do we work on this topic in Montreal and Quebec? And I think afterwards we'll be able to get back to our collective discussion. Is that, if let's say we look at one specific SDGs, in this case climate action, the work that we're doing as an Impact Hub movement in Montreal and in Quebec is how can we create a collective ecosystem of partners who have obviously various expertise in order to create integration of specific SDGs. So Impact Hub being kind of in the center of a convening of different partners coming from a variety of sectors, are trying to understand what or how can we better measure our impact on our transversal impact on a variety of sustainable development goals. And we do this by creating, obviously, and implementing projects at the local level. And one of our projects this year, and this past month and upcoming weeks, has been the development of a digital toolkit aimed at reducing carbon footprint of citizens. So I think I've seen in our list of participants our partner Cifrio, with which we are working, we are collaborating in Quebec and in Montreal to develop this toolkit on reducing carbon footprint of citizens. So we're aiming at launching a wide communication campaign in a few weeks' time for the citizens to better understand how to reduce their carbon footprint. This is not public information yet. I think one of our interests in joining this conversation, Impact Hub and CIFRIO being all the way from Quebec and Montreal, was to first tell you that some people are thinking about the same topic on the other side of the ocean, and that we're producing a toolkit that is aimed at reducing carbon footprint, but two, that we don't have all of the answers, and that we're looking at, let's say, benefiting our knowledge around best practices around the world on what's been already, what is on people's mind during this COVID-19 crisis around how can we reduce as citizens our digital carbon footprint. So I think, Yatwan, I will leave it up here on this kind of an open question. Really what I wanted to provide to the group today was, one, how can we look at the digital carbon footprint from the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals lens, because that's really the work. Oops. We have someone that we need to mute. Yeah. And two, given it's an informal discussion, of course, I'm interested in hearing thoughts about what was just presented on SDGs and digital footprint, and see if people in this group also would have recommendations. Maybe some people have worked already on this topic in Holland, in London, in Stockholm. Really, it's a co-creation effort that we're doing, Impact Hub and CIFRIO in Canada, and I thought it would be interesting to dive into the ecosystem of Sweden and elsewhere to inform this discussion. So I will pass it back on to you, Yatwan, to lead the next step of the discussion, but really happy to join you today from Montreal. You're muted, Yatwan. You are muted.
You're
Yatwan.
muted. Yes.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Charles, for that overview. It's really interesting to see on the more UN and the broader strategic aspects of the UN development goal, and a little bit more about what your work is. And as you say, we don't have all the answers. And just like Charles, I am also not an expert in this particular event. I am just mainly interested. Oops, sorry. I've taken some sneaky pictures of all of you, by the way, earlier on. I hope that's okay. So a little bit about me then. I'm Yat, and I'm from London originally, and that's why there are quite a lot of Londoners joining us today from my previous network and current friends as well. And I moved to Sweden in 2017. And my background is an architect and urban designer. And for a long time, I've been thinking a lot about how, for the mantra at the end of people's email signatures, think carefully before you print, save the environment. But the phrase save the environment always, make me feel a little bit uneasy, because we're not saving the environment, we're just reducing our impact. But also now with, the likes of Apple making really nice minimalistic apparatus for us, it's so easy to forget how complex all these different things are linked together. And in my previous life as an urban planner, urban designer, working for the Mayor of London, to produce a strategic urban planning framework, one of our tasks is to review industrial land and to see what are the state of the industrial land, how are they used, what are the building typologies, and so then we can see if there's evidence base to support whether or not these industrial land would be regenerated and into housing area, or could they be consolidated? And one of these surveys that we did on, you can see it on the little mini iPads. So it's really easy to take, to go on site regardless of the wind, and you don't have to worry about piece of paper flapping about or all the admin work of inputting them in later on. And so walking around this, you know, small-ish industrial land, which is in Hayes, in West London, where there's a big cluster of data centers. It's that, you know, then as an urban designer, you get to see the actual physical aspect, buildings that houses all the internet usage that we don't see behind our screen. And they're not really pretty buildings, they're just massive, big sheds. And now since coming to Stockholm, I've turned into a social entrepreneur. And even though I still feel I'm practicing architecture and urban design, it's not so much the mainstream architecture with design and strategic framework, but it's still related to how people use the city and how do you improve their well-being. And so at the moment, as a response to the pandemic, I'm developing a mobile app called Being Here to help support people's mental health. And so by putting together this app, it makes me have an even better understanding of the complexity of, that goes behind, you know, a very simple looking app or simple website. So here I've got an example for you. This is to show the internationalness of it. This is in Swedish, as in complementary to Charles's French earlier on, and our event in English. This is the website of Carl Hansen, which is one of a previous venue for Green Drinks last year, and is a Nordic fast food restaurant with sustainability integrated in part of its goal. So when you go to the website, first of all, you will see the domain name, so which is the address that you go to, but behind the domain is the hosting with the storage of all the pictures or the text. And also, if you scroll further down, they've got news with news articles and a blog, so that also connects to different pages. So when you click on it, then that's actually like a different street or building that you would enter. And then further down, then you have the social media with links to the YouTube videos, so that's integrated to YouTube, and all that traffic and the streaming that's connected to that. So there's always detecting when there's something new that's being linked. So that's also traffic invisible in the background of a website. And similarly, they've got Instagram feed that's dynamic and will show their latest photos. And then at the bottom is the mailing list that integrates into a mailing list program such as MailChimp. And it all looks really similar, but as you can see, that's already a number of functions on one simple website for a cafe. And that is just scrolling down without clicking on any of the links. So just like in architecture and urban design, there are a lot of similarities with the digital and urban infrastructure and how complex it really is. And while I was thinking about this event for Green Drinks in May about digital carbon footprint, I was really pleased to see that at the similar time, the BBC released a short documentary called Dirty Streaming, which talks about all the data and the energy consumption of streaming videos and Netflix in particular. And this was made before the lockdown, so I think it's even more poignant now. There are lots of, if you're interested in figures and numbers, you can watch that program. It's 30 minutes. You might need a VPN to watch from BBC iPlayer, but I thought it was very interesting with some of the numbers. Although there are a number of articles that were published from the tech industry to say why they don't agree with some of the content, although they didn't dispute the figures, but more about the general principles of it. But also calculating how much energy is used every time we search on Google or we open an email is really difficult because it's so complex. It's not just about whether you're looking from your phone, from your iPhone or an Android or your laptop or the type of website, because there's a lot of different things that goes behind it, just like it's almost impossible to calculate exactly how much your physical carbon footprint is based on your lifestyle, because not all supermarkets are the same, and not all train travels are equal either. So I found this infographic published by Climate Care, made in partnership with Greenpeace and Time for Change, etc. And I think this is relatively new. There are some figures for 2020, so I hope is current. And again, I am not an expert. This is something I found on the internet using X number of grams of carbon dioxide in the meanwhile. So I will just go through some of these figures now and some of the findings. But again, you know, there's a caveat of we need to look more carefully into how they made those calculations. So first of all, the internet uses a lot of energy and emits lots of greenhouse gases from both the manufacturing of the physical product and also the running the network. So depending on whether this power is powered by green energy or is it fossil fuel, depending on the country and the data center that is made from. And then once we are online itself, then there are some interesting figures here that when we use a search engine, then there is an output of greenhouse gases. Even looking at a web page, apparently 2 grams of carbon dioxide per second. A Google search is about 0.2 to 7 grams of carbon dioxide emission. Sorry, for the looking is 0.2 gram of carbon dioxide. And an email is estimated 4 grams of carbon dioxide. And if there's a large attachment, that could be as much as 50 grams. So apologies to all the making you sign up, linked to this event from Facebook to Eventbrite linking, and then all the ticket attachment with it. So I have just made you, Stockholm Green Drinks has been clocking up our carbon footprint there. And the information communication and technology industry is estimating to contribute to 2% of the global carbon dioxide emission. And that includes social media, music, email, streaming videos, and buying stuff online. So quite a lot of us are probably doing more online shopping nowadays as well and getting delivered. And so data usage is estimated to triple between 2012 and 2017. And streaming video and audio are the biggest drivers. So I am definitely guilty of watching a lot of YouTube video and even listening to YouTube music when I probably don't need to have the video on. But a lot of the, luckily for us, a lot of the major internet companies have taken steps to go to use greener services. So good, lucky for me, using my Apple iPhone and linking all my work on Google Drive. Facebook, apparently not so bad either, and Box, Rackspace, and Salesforce are also good companies that have tried to do something about their carbon footprint. So Facebook is now trying to use renewable energy to power its data centers, including wind, and Apple also using wind and solar energy and geothermal and solar energy. And that if we shift to cloud-based operations, if we stream instead of downloading everything on our computer, that could have a reduction of 38% of energy use in the world data center by 2020, which is now. So what can we do as citizens to reduce our carbon footprint? So there's some of the obvious ones. So we can change our email habits, like not reply to all unnecessarily, even if they're really funny. Unsubscribe from newsletters, so declutter our inbox a little bit. That's also probably good for our mental health. And talk in person rather than over an email. So clearly this is out of date now with the pandemic. And if you are also hosting your own website, consider storing data on the green cloud provider. And some of them are run on completely renewable energy sources. And when I first set up my company, Urban Beings, back in 2010, it was really difficult to find a server to host my website. I was using 100% green energy. It was pretty fringe back then, but I also loved the name of the website host. It was called Fat Cow. So some of the big companies that you saw are doing good things. Was there one that you noticed that's not there? And that was Amazon. So Amazon, which is the biggest data service, so including even the BBC is hosting their programs on it. So there are some things that we can't change and choose our behavior. And the other thing, more common sense one on how to reduce our carbon footprint and also physical energy consumption is to shut down our computers, just like we were told to switch off our TV, not put it on standby. And to unplug our computers. And I didn't know this, that we could use a tablet or a smartphone instead, because I had also questioned whether a laptop uses more or less than an iPhone, because my battery runs out quite quickly. And also whether you put your phone on Wi-Fi or data also has a different consumption. So data would apparently use twice as much energy as going on the Wi-Fi. So, so data center is one of the biggest pollution contributors to our energy use. And this is something beyond our control, because it really depends on the services that we use and where they're hosted. But as we said, as you saw earlier on, some of the big companies like Facebook are trying to use more renewable source. So the reason that the data centers use so much energy is because the computers and the servers need a lot of energy to power it, and also they need a lot of energy to cool down the data centers, so then the files don't get corrupted. And so to cool down the center takes up a lot of energy as well. And so one of the solutions that Facebook has used is to locate it in really cold places, like in Luleå in northern Sweden, in the Arctic Circle. So then the temperature outside, they can get some of the cold air from the outside, the -4, -20 degrees, to naturally cool down the center. And also in Stockholm, they have the data park. So it's built in northern Stockholm, where the energy, the heat emitted from the data servers can be used to power, to go into the district heating network to heat up the houses instead. And also, so this is what they are. So that the idea is that instead of going from brownfield, like where it's the data center and you have to artificially cool it, you capture the heat and for the residents. And so they have calculated that 10 megawatts can heat up 20,000 modern residential flats. So I don't know how long that is in the data center, like what does that mean in terms of time and heating by the data center usage. And so now I thought we could open up the conversation with maybe firstly with Charles and also your colleagues at Cypriot in Montreal to kind of link back to how some of these digital carbon footprint can be linked back to, as you mentioned a little bit earlier, with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and what we can do as citizens and how will that change the toolkit. Yeah, so I'll unmute you, Charles.
No, thanks, Yatuan. I think your presentation was truly amazing. I took a few notes while you were speaking. In regards to the digital toolkit that we're developing aimed really at citizens, I think one of the biggest challenge is awareness, really. And like, I think it was very well explained in the presentation, how citizens can easily limit their emails and do small actions, but we've become accustomed to not doing it. I think even of myself, I'm someone who really likes to document by email all of the discussion I'm having with partners in order to keep the flow going and keep the information. So my open question is still like, I see there are common measures that exist, but I found it hard to implement them. And I think that maybe the common framework of the United Nations can help think about one specific issue as being interrelated to others in order to effect change more efficiently. But as I said in the beginning, I'm still looking for the best answers to do that. But this is my initial thought. I'd be curious to hear about my colleagues at Cypriot. They're experts in digital transformation of institutions, and like I'd be curious to hear what they think. We have Denis, I think, and Patricia on the line.
Hey.
Hello, Dennis.
Well, good afternoon. I'm glad to be in that meeting. Actually, I try to reduce my carbon print by limiting my video presence on meetings. So in Cifrio, we're pushing forward the use of the digital possibilities, technologies to reduce our carbon footprint. But Charles, as you said, one of the biggest challenge, I believe, is how to make people more sensitive to it, how to develop the consciousness of the public, how to, it's not because we know, sometimes it's because there is no shock in the mindset of people to make a change, to switch from one behavior to another. So I think that the path to trying to sensibilize the conscious of people is just an excellent one. Now, to reach those people means we also use technologies. But as the presentation was showing, I think it's very interesting to see, well, actually, for the cloud, for instance, I know this could be very energy consuming, but seeing that there is different clouds using different types of energy, this is very interesting when choosing one to work with. So I appreciate very much the presentation.
Thank you. Patricia, do you have any other comments you would like to add, and how that this might change your toolkits for helping citizens reduce their carbon footprint?
Actually, we're thinking about doing a video in English in the coming weeks. It's a 3 minutes video with a different kind of captures to show different data. This will consume energy, of course, but just for instance, it's the first time since that pandemic. At home, we call to the grocery store, they prepare everything, and they make a delivery at home. So it's not far from here, but in their Econoline or in their vehicle, they can put maybe 7, 8, 10, maybe 15 grocery orders package, and so they do only one delivery rather than having 10, 12, 15 cars at the grocery store. So this is an example although this was there before, we never used it before because we like going to the grocery store. But that's interesting to, well, receiving the grocery store is like a Christmas party. So because we didn't see and touch vegetables, for instance, and we assume that everything will be just great when this arrived. But this is to show that in this pandemic, we open up a little bit more our mindset, trying to find different ways to make things working.
Yeah, I think it's on balance, isn't it? Whether if something is better or worse. And I think now with the pandemic, do we need special rules? Because is it better for us to stay more at home, and especially the people in high risk vulnerable groups, so they don't go out? Whereas someone like me who is able to go out, especially in Sweden where we don't have the same level of restriction, then would it still be better for me to go shopping in person, because then I don't use up more energy by looking online or the e-commerce and linking to different payment systems. And also then I don't over order. I will just go to the supermarket. I will be mindful. I can only buy what I can fit in the basket, because I would have to carry it home afterwards, and I can reuse my bags, which was one of the original reasons I stopped online shopping when I was in London, because I got really angry that the supermarkets won't take, they said if they take they use so many more bags than I would do. And then they said they would just throw in the bin and recycle it. So I thought, I'm never doing online shopping again.
Yeah, there is the small, we live in a small city in the south shore of Montreal. So it's very easy. Actually, going to the grocery store, there's nobody there. So just relax making the grocery. But also because we are social individuals, social persons. So only working online is not, it doesn't fit enough the psychological energy it takes. Because let's put it this way, our psychological side just lies just like um, a gas, a tank of gas or tank of fuel like for cars. There is the empty from empty to full. So people staying at home all the time. So their array will be more empty than full. And so although we think about managing the or limiting the carbon print, but also we need to consider the psychological side or the social aspect of individuals. We need hugging people from time to time. That's the way we are built like that. We have been created like that. So we need to figure out how this will rework, you see.
So maybe a digital hug at some point, an app that can physically hug you, a wearable.
To some point.
But also have to be mindful of the amount of energy that consumes. Maybe we can open up the floor to anyone else who would like to comment. I'm mindful of the time, so we've got maybe 10 minutes.
Yeah, hi, it's Dagmar here. Hi, I'm sitting in front of my house, by the way, just in case you're wondering.
Yeah,
I've got,
lovely.
yeah, no, it's nice. I'm seeking the sun because I was indoors all day. I think this is a really interesting discussion. So first of all, just to introduce myself very briefly, I'm sitting in sunny South London in the UK. I'm an architect and urban designer, and I met Yat a few years ago when we all did the same sort of training course in the last recession, upskilling whilst we didn't have anything else to work on. I do also know Paola, who's also on this call, because I worked with her at the RIBA in London. I'm very passionate about this topic. I was educated, I grew up in Germany, where I feel we've talked about all of this stuff about 30 years ago when I was in secondary school. You know, I was writing with water-based ink on only recycled paper that was made, you know, and we were taught all of this awareness, and I feel as the years have gone by, a lot of it has gone away again because people lost attention. And I think it's a big topic, and we need to look at it holistically, I find. And this whole thing about data for me is very important because it's so all pervasive in our lives, and I do ask myself questions all the time about my choices, and what I'm lacking about the world of data at the moment is information. So I think you guys out there working on all these projects, trying to visualize what our carbon footprint actually is, I think that's incredibly important. The environment is so much more than just carbon footprint, but I think it's a start. And for me, the important thing is I want to know what impact my actions have. And right now, when it comes to using digital media, I don't have that. You know, I mean, there are bits and pieces here and there, but then, you know, I work in a fairly big architecture office, and we're moving to cloud computing. What on earth is the impact of cloud computing? I cannot get my head around it. And I think we need to have information fast so that we can make informed decisions, and we need to look quicker. And there are probably barriers from corporations like, say, Amazon. They don't want us to know, you know, and I think that's sort of a double-sided thing. So we do need to make choices, but without having information, I don't feel we can make terribly many choices. So what are everybody else's thoughts on this?
So I can answer one of your questions regarding what is the impact of cloud computing. I work as a data scientist, and right now I'm working at Oracle, and you know they're all about the cloud. And my supervisor actually sort of did this analysis, and it was kind of funny. Basically, there is a trade-off. The trade-off is that with cloud computing, individuals or companies, they basically can only take a portion of the server that they need. So if you're running very small websites, there is a huge advantage to cloud computing because you don't have to buy a whole server just to run a basic website. So there is a huge savings there because you're saving off of the equipment. On the other hand, though, one of the biggest uses of cloud computing right now is, well, like large institutions, those who, if they hypothetically wanted to, could buy their own servers and use it all up. They still end up using it. There are reasons for it, but I won't get into it. But in those particular cases, it's the overhead of managing the infrastructure is 50% more energy compared to if they were just to use it themselves. So that's basically the trade-off. If you're using cloud computing, it takes, depending on how it's done, up to 50% more energy. But on the other hand, if you only need a portion of a server, there's a savings there because, okay, well, if you only need 1%, why spend? I mean, computers always operate on 100%. Even if you put your task manager and it says, oh, it's only operating at 2%. Okay, maybe that's 2% of like, but that's not true. It's just flat out not true. It is 100% all the time. So I should qualify that statement, but I'm not going to. But that's basically the idea there. Now, regarding your question regarding what about users, what about their data, what about blah, 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 blah. So that is a bit more interesting. So so one thing is that it is energy intensive to constantly stream something. So if you're going to be like, let's say that there's a TV series that you love to watch and you watch it over and over again, it is better to download it once and store it on your local machine than it is to constantly take it over. If you have files or something, it is better to keep it on a physical hard drive in your house somewhere than it is to keep it online, because if it's online, the hard disk is always on a powered on state. But again, there is a trade-off there because it's like, how often do you access it? And do you want access from it everywhere? There are other benefits for having data in the cloud because now you have redundancy already built in, which is something that you don't have if your own physical hard drive. And there are other trade-offs there as well. So yeah,
I would say
basically
that
there are
most
trade-offs.
people, sorry, Hara, I would say most people don't have their physical hard drive nowadays because even the big companies are using the cloud, hiring from Amazon or some of the like other data servers. So there aren't that many. I would say that that's more in a minority, or?
There's always a hard disk. It's either owned by Amazon or it's owned by you.
Yeah.
So
So you can choose which one to host with as a more responsible one.
But there again, it's like there's no point in buying a 30 terabyte hard disk if you're only going to use 50.
Sure. Can I just open up if anyone else has? We can maybe take one or two more question or comments.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to actually ask, like, so what about like streaming services? Are those a problem? Because I was just thinking, Hara was just talking about that it's better to download and to save on a hard drive. But like streaming services that are very popular now, like Netflix and Hulu and that kind of stuff, that doesn't then sound very green, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So in the BBC documentary, it's mainly looking at streaming. So assuming that all the data is transferred internationally, invisibly behind your screen. And so but then all the things add up. The more you use it, then the more energy we'll use. And again, it depends on whether you're using Google or Vimeo and where do they host it from and where do they upload it from. But I think it is really difficult to calculate because there are so many different variables and there are so many different services linked together. But on the other hand, maybe we can take heart in terms of informing our own action. There are some common sense things which I know that until today I haven't really thought too much about, like the way I've connected up my office and my digital workspace. It sounds really smart. Everything is on Google Drive, everything is linked on Google Gmail, Calendar, everything's on the cloud. But on the other hand, do I really need to have all these apps on my phone and my iPad and my laptop? Do I need them to be sending me notifications all the time? Because by having notifications on, it is constantly scanning the background. I don't know how much difference that will make by turning it off. But just like, in the real world, we know that the less plastic bag we use, the less we buy, then the smaller our impact. And I guess we can start with some of these principles, but maybe 10 years down the line, we'll find out it's a negligible difference. But on the other hand, I think the companies who are in the industry would be able to make a much bigger impact, which I think links on nicely to next month's drinks. So let me go back to my screen. So next month, we will be having Helena Lindquist joining us as our guest speaker. And Helena is the founder of The Light Switch, and she works with global actors to try to solve the complex climate change crisis. So she mainly works in the area of knowledge transfer to see how organizations in the public sector and the research sector and the businesses can learn from each other and work together. Just see, is Helena there? Would Helena like to say something herself?
Yes. Hello. I don't know if you can see me. I'm sitting. Can you hear me? And
yes,
see me?
I can hear you.
Yeah. I just have to share my surroundings because I'm sitting outside in nature.
Yeah.
And it's very pretty right now, but I can't see the screen very well. But
there you go. We can see you now.
Yeah. So thanks very much, Yat, for inviting me to speak in June, the next one. So very briefly, well, Helena is my name, and I run Light Switch, and I specialize in knowledge transfer between organizations in the areas of renewable energy and climate change mitigation and other sustainability areas. And I work mostly internationally, but also within Sweden. And I thought my speech in a couple of weeks will circle around how, well, this world of international collaborations for like sharing knowledge and advancing clean energy, especially how that works, and what are the barriers, what are the potential, and also now with this new situation we're finding ourselves in with the COVID-19, looking forward a little bit, what could come of this and how we're changing the way of working and yeah, experience and insights from that world. That's what I thought.
Super. So that will be, so we meet on the first Tuesday of each month. So the next one in June, let's see, it's the 2nd of June. Is that right? So Stockholm, yeah, 2nd of June. And then I've been super organized. I've been so inspired by the current pandemic. I've not only got Helena lined up for June's event, but I've also got July's event. We'll be going back to my roots of being in the built environment from the perspective of an architect and urban designers, because we are quite an idealistic bunch and we always have lots of ideas about how we can make the world a better place. So joining us in July will be Paula and Dagmar from London. So would you like to say a few words, Dagmar or Paula?
Yeah, hi. So I'll be talking to you a bit about my work that I do in my within the office I work in, which is Scott Brownrigg. We're an international office, and in this crisis now, everybody's working from home. We have a research arm called the Design Research Unit, and that has been focusing solely on COVID-19 responses, as in how will it have an impact on our buildings, on materials, on surfaces, but also on the cities. And the research topic I'm working on is looking at how do we use space differently. There's the space in our houses and the space within our cities, and we're going to look at 3 density areas, very dense urban living, like places Singapore, Hong Kong, then the mid-density, which is basically London, and then low-density suburbia, and how we feel they will need to adjust the design. But I think we're also working very strongly on sustainable design. That sort of, I always say it's built in. We always do that anyway. I hate to have to talk about that separately. So I'll try and give you a bit of an overview of where we are with that and how the two topics will mesh together.
Super. Paolo, would you like to say a quick word?
Hi. Yeah. Well, to be honest with you, I still have to think about exactly how I want to focus the conversation. And but my prime interest, as I mentioned earlier on, is about the sustainability of materials, the provenance of materials, and how these are impacting on buildings and the carbon footprint that the selection and the of these leave on in the environment. So I might be focusing very much on how the materials, probably antimicrobial materials, will affect on the life of people at the environmental level, and the selection of materials so that we do as architects for the buildings that we build, so that we try to be a bit more ethical in the way that we select the materials.
Super, thank you. So that'll be Dagmar and Paula on Tuesday, 7th of July, 5 o'clock London time, 6 o'clock Sweden time, 12 o'clock lunchtime, Montreal. So before we go, I thought, shall we all turn on our camera and I can make a little video of us toasting, waving, and a little toast if you have a drink in hand. And then I will also take a little screenshot of the photo of all of us, if that's okay.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay, so after 3, shall we say hello Green Drinks? Should we say Stockholm Green Drinks, or wherever you're from? Oh, I know, let's be ambitious. Let's do a first, so we have, I think, Stockholm, London, Montreal. Anywhere else? An island. So should we do first, the Stockholmers will say, cheers, Stockholm Green Drinks, and then the Londoners will say, hello from London, and then the Montrealers will say, the Montrealers will say, hello from Montreal. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Right. Hello from Stockholm.
Hello from Stockholm.
Cheers.
And
London.
London, hi, no drink, unfortunately, I'm just waving, hi.
Yeah, no drinks. It's still early.
Hello from Montreal and Quebec.
Hello from Montreal.
An island.
Mm.
Molly, you're on mute.
Hello from Ireland, sorry.
Super. Right, I'll just take a quick photo then. So wave or drinks. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Super, lovely. So let's see. I will send the presentation from today to all of you who've registered on Eventbrite, and I will combine it with Charles's presentation and my one, and you can look at the infographics more carefully. Just to be clear, I cannot take credit for that. That was from Climate Care. And then at the end of the presentation, you will see a link to join our Facebook group. And also, if you're not on Facebook, then how to join our mailing list. So you can join us again for future Green Drinks. And let me know if you would like to be, share a topic that you are passionate about sustainability. And maybe you could also be, like Charles, be our guest speaker at a future Drinks. Okay. Any last words?
Yes, Birgitta had a comment on power. If it's allowed for
Sorry,
us.
Brigitte. Yeah, Brigitte, you have a comment on the power?
So, thank you. I'm a former architect and I'm lighting designer, so I've been thinking a lot about power, but mainly power and light. And I'm also doing a small solar lamp. So I actually know by the size of the solar cell how much more a cell phone, a screen, actually needs. So I've been very basic, but of course everything is much more complicated than that. But what I wanted to add was that in Stockholm there has been some kind of discussion on power consumption, I think a year ago, because the system for the power is actually not dimensioned for our use now. So when we were starting to, I was working at a consultancy for lighting with electro engineers, and if you build new large scale houses nowadays, it's really one of the factors of scarcity is really power. And that was a topic in the news for some time, and then they started to discuss power consumption, and that was really interesting. So in Stockholm it has been a little bit talked on, at least to my knowledge.
Yeah. So that's one of the, I'm really happy about living in Stockholm and Sweden, where they do have a lot of consideration about energy. So so they say 90% of the waste is recycled, and that's including 50% from plastic, which is burnt to make energy. So even though there are some considerations about the eco-ness of burning plastic, but at least it's still trying to turn waste into resource. So I think Sweden is, we could be in a worse country than in Sweden, but of course it doesn't mean that just because our energy is kind of greener than other countries, and doesn't mean that we should be less careful about our consumption and our waste consumption, what we throw away, what we don't recycle, but then it does help that the system is there to help us, which I think is really, so I think that flows on really nicely to Helena's talk next month about the strategic and the policymakers and the organizations and leaders, what are their roles. So today we talk more about our role as citizens, because it is on all levels really, isn't it, that we need to do it all together. Yeah. Any other last comments before we go? Super. Well, thank you very much for a really nice meeting. And I have to confess, this is my first non-alcoholic green drinks, out of courtesy to our Montreal friends who are still at lunchtime and not quite wine o'clock yet. So this is a very sensible elderflower squash. It's
you'd be surprised.
Well, thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
You're welcome.
Merci.
So I'll be in touch with the presentation, and also when Charles has the video, I'll send you the link to that as well.
Excellent.
Okay. Super.
Thank you.
Have a good
Bye.
rest of the evening or day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Au revoir.
Bye bye.